Hello, alright, welcome. So this is going to be my video about Chapter 1 of Mice and Men. These are the questions you left for me, or the areas of the chapter that you were confused on as we move into the rest of the book. So the thing I would like to do first is kind of set up some context and answer your context questions, aka setting, who the characters are, and so forth. The first thing you need to know is this is taking place in California. It's taking place in the Salida Valley. The Salida Valley is, think central California, but all the way on the coastline. That's about where we're at, or the general area. What's going on during this time period in the Salida Valley is it's the 1930s, it's the Great Depression. We had the Dust Bowl, which caused a lot of agricultural issues, and that plays into who Lenny and George are, as they are migrant workers. And one of you asked me who these people are, or a little context on them. You were supposed to take notes on them, but migrant workers basically were people who worked on farms and in fields, and a lot of them were migrating, so that's why they're calling migrant workers. There was this big issue in the Midwest during this time period where crops weren't growing, farms were shutting down. It was just a really bad agricultural time. So these workers they migrated to the West Coast or California to find jobs. So George and Lenny, in retrospect, and by that definition, have probably traveled quite a bit. I don't know if they're directly from California. It's never really said. But that is what a migrant worker is. There's someone who works on the farm or in the fields, but they've had to move around a lot, or they continue to move around a lot for work because they don't have a specific, their own farm. And that plays really nicely into their goals, right? George and Lenny don't have a specific age. I imagine they are probably late 20s to early 30s based off of what we know, the job conditions, things like that, but that is my best guess for you. A very popular question I got is, what's the relationship between the two of them? Are they brothers? Are they friends? Etc. It does get a little more clear in later chapters. It's more directly answered, but I can tell you right now, they are not related. They are friends. They have known each other for a little while now. They're not brothers, not related or anything like that. They're just friends that happen to now be going on this little adventure together. What else do I got here? So that's their relationship, how old they are, how much they move around. Another question I have specifically about our characters is about Lenny. And someone asked me what is specifically, what's his diagnosis, is what someone asked me. And again, I don't have a specific answer. I don't want to, sit here and say I know how to diagnose people, or I have the proper diagnosis. I'm going to continue to label it as a developmental delay, because that is what it is, and that is what they're trying to specify with. Lenny is a full-grown adult, but his brain has not developed into being an adult. He still has the brain of a child, or developmentally only has developed to a child. So that is what you need to know. We don't necessarily need to have a diagnosis for it. We just need to understand that portion of it. So Lenny is developmentally delayed. He did not fully develop his brain, and he still thinks like a kid. So that's all you need to really understand with that. What else do I have for you? What happened in Weed? So they are migrant workers, right? They're moving around. We're in California, and what you may have noticed from the first chapter is that they were originally in a town called Weed, or their previous job was in this town. What happened in Weed? So the only reason they're leaving places, to be clear, is because of situations that come up. The situation that happened in Weed is Lenny kind of caused an issue. So in our chapter, we found out that Lenny likes to keep mice, and he really likes to pet them because they're soft. Think of a child and having a stuffed animal or a blanket, right? Maybe you had one as a kid, that it was kind of like a security thing, right? You like to keep it around. Kids like soft materials, right? So that's just what he does. So what happened in Weed is he saw a woman who had this dress on, and he thought the dress it looked very soft. So he wanted to kind of feel the material. And if a kid reached out and maybe tried feeling the material of a woman's dress, people would kind of laugh, or it wouldn't be as big of a deal, right? But this is a full-grown adult, and George is Lenny. Lenny is a really big guy. And like I said, 6'6", like linebacker sort of dude, big and muscular. And he's holding on to this woman's dress. And what he ends up doing is, instead of letting go, because obviously the woman's panicking and George is telling him to stop, Lenny doesn't stop. He holds on tighter. So with the mice, we found out that they always end up dying because he doesn't know his own strength. Think of like a puppy and a really big dog. If you've ever seen them interact. The really big dog, if it's very playful, wants to play, right? But it doesn't realize its own strength. So it might be too aggressive or too strong for the puppy to play with, right? And that's what we're kind of seeing. So doesn't realize his own strength, doesn't know when to let go. And what ends up happening is he holds onto the dress, then she panics, like the dress rips a little bit, and she runs away and is like, then the people are after him. The authorities are. So that's why they have to flee in the first place. You learn a little bit more about what happens in later chapters, so I don't want to give much more away, but that is what you should know from chapter 1 so far. So we've talked about the relationship between George and Lenny. We've talked about them moving around, what's Lenny's disorder, or what is his diagnosis, where are things taking place, what happened to Weed, the title itself. So the title of this story of Mice and Men is actually based off a poem by Robert Burns, and it's called To a Mouse on Turning Up Her Nest. The reason this story is called Of Mice and Men is not just because of the mice that play a part in the story. There's literally mice and men in the story itself. But it's also kind of representing that fragileness of life and like the comparison of like being fragile. So obviously a mouse is very like a small dainty little thing versus a man, and it's alluding to this idea and one of the themes or messages of the story of how much we can push to accomplish, but how fragile a dream can be, or how fragile a mouse can be in comparison to the works of men. And that plays right into my final question, which is, what are some of these themes and messages that we're supposed to be picking up from the story? I don't want to just hand you them, but here's some things that you need to be thinking about and focusing on. One, this idea of companionship is a huge one in this story. The American dream is a huge theme in this story. The biggest message, or like this question, I'm going to call it, that we're looking into is, how fragile is the American dream? Because obviously we are in a time period where people thought it wasn't possible anymore. We need to keep that in mind. We are in modernism, and in modernism they said, it's too much. We obviously can't accomplish it. We are down on ourselves. Is the American dream even a thing? And that plays directly into this. So that message, or one of the themes that you're going to be discovering throughout this story, is answered through that question. Is it possible? And what is John Steinbeck trying to show us? We will talk more about messages and themes as we move forward, but I don't want to give too much away because it is just the first chapter. But like I said, focus on friendship, companionship, and I would also focus on the opposite of that, loneliness. We've maybe kind of seen ideas of that already through George saying, I could have left you a long time ago, Lenny threatening to run away. What would it be like to be alone in this world? And maybe how does that play into achieving the American dream? With that, I'm going to pause there on my contribution to chapter 1. I will try to continue to make these videos as long as you need me to. So as you continue reading, please leave me questions directly about the chapter, and I will hopefully be able to make videos to help clarify things or review them. Thanks for tuning in. I hope this helped. If you have any more questions for me, just leave me an email, and then I will see you later. Thanks for stopping by.